So once again, I'm going to repeat. In a today's session, we are going to cover the topic that is inline function. So what is the definition of inline function? Inline function is nothing but it is a request to a compiler to make a function an inline function. And that inline function is used to reduce the overhead of function calling. It means that when we are going to use the word that is inline, when we are going to use the word inline, so whatever may be the code which are present in the body of function, when we are going to use the word inline, so whatever may be the code which are present in a body section of that particular function, so that code should be treated as a single line code. Okay. म्हणजे ज्या वेळेस आपण इनलाईन वर्ड यूज करू आणि या फंक्शनच्या बॉडीमध्ये जो काही कोड राहील तो कोड काय तुमचा एका लाईन मध्ये पुट करण्यात येईल. सो दॅट इज द मिनिंग ऑफ इनलाईन फंक्शन्स. So see the second point, if a compiler that treat a function as an inline function, it substitute the code of function in a single line. And third point will says that inline function should contain a single instructions. So see here, if so this is the syntax for inline function. Here we are putting the word inline. Okay. After that, before the function name, we are going to write the return type, and then we are going to write the function name. Okay. Now this is the body part of our function. So if we are going to write any single instruction here, and after that instruction, if we put the semicolon, so after putting the semicolon, it indicates that the instruction for inline function is over. So once we put the semicolon, so the instruction for that inline function will be over. So that's why the third point will say that inline function should contain a single instructions. So you cannot write like that in an inline function. So consider that this is the first instruction and I put here semicolon, and again I write one instruction and again I put semicolon. So that body part should not be treated as a inline, because once you put the semicolon, and we know that the inline function should contain only single instruction, means when we put the semicolon, so that line is over for that particular instructions. So here two lines are present, so that's why that body portion should not be treated as a inline function, because it contains only a single instruction. इनलाईन फंक्शन मध्ये काय असते, फक्त एकच इन्स्ट्रक्शन प्रेझेंट असते. बरोबर आहे. एकदा इन्स्ट्रक्शन तुम्ही लिहिली आणि त्या इन्स्ट्रक्शनच्या नंतर तुम्ही सेमिकोलन जर समजा पुट केलं, सो इट विल इंडिकेट्स दॅट की ती एक पर्टिक्युलर लाईन काय झाली तुमची फिनिश झाली आहे. बरोबर आहे. मग सेमिकोलन पुट केल्यानंतर जर समजा तुम्ही दुसरी लाईन पुट केली, सो दॅट सेकंड लाईन शुड बी ट्रीटेड ॲज अ नेक्स्ट लाईन. म्हणजे इनलाईन जर समजा वर्ड यूज केल्यानंतर ह्या दोन्ही लाईन तुमच्या एकत्र येणार नाहीत, कारण ह्या दोन्ही लाईन काय डिफरंट आहे आणि ह्या दोन्ही लाईन कशाने सेपरेट झाल्या आहेत, सेमिकोलननी. एकदा तुम्ही सेमिकोलन पुट केलं, दॅट्स इट. मीन्स ती एक पर्टिक्युलर इन्स्ट्रक्शन तुमची इनलाईन फंक्शनची इन्स्ट्रक्शन झाली, आणि इनलाईन फंक्शन मध्ये फक्त एकच इन्स्ट्रक्शन असते, नॉट मोर दॅन दॅट. सो दॅट्स वाय, सो दिस इज दी सिम्पली body section of inline function, and inline function will contain only single instruction. So once again I am telling you what is the definition of inline function. Inline function is nothing but it is a request to a compiler to make function as a inline function, and it is used to reduce the overhead of function calling. So if our compiler treat the function as an inline function, so it substitute a complete code within a single line, and inline function will contain only the single instructions. And this is the syntax for inline function. First of all, we are going to use the keyword as the inline, then we are going to use a return type, that is either integer or void. Then we are going to write down the name of the functions, and this is the body portion of our inline function. So we are going to see the example of inline function. So see here, this is the example of inline function. Here we are going to use the keyword as a inline, then we are using here return type, that is int, then we are using here function name, that is fun, and then I am going to pass the parameters, that is integer a and integer b. So see here, that inline function will contain only single instruction. So here I am writing the conditional statement here, that is it will returns the value of either a or b, means the value which is a maximum, that value should be written by that conditional statement. So I am going to check a is greater than b. If a is greater, it will return a. If b is greater, it will return b. So as I seen in a previous slide, as a inline function has contain only single instruction. So see here, this is the inline function, and that inline function will contain only the single instructions. Then after that main function, we are going to print which value is the greater, and to print which value is the greater, we are going to pass the value of integer a and integer b in the function. So see here, see out maximum number is. Now we are going to call the function, and we are going to pass the argument to that function, that is 10 and 20. So out of that 10 and 20, after after checking the value 10 and 20 by using this conditional uh, statements, it will returns a value, that is which value is the greater one. So we will see the example. So we are going to run this example. So see here. Okay, let it. We will start the program from unit number 1. So this was the first program which we have taken, that is the program on constant. So I think all of you know the difference between constant and the macro. Okay, that program we have taken. So constant, before we can see the difference between constant and macro, can anybody tell me? See, we are revising the concept. So I expect that everyone should answer. What is the difference between constant and variable? So see here, it will return a maximum number, that is 20, because in an inline function, that inline function will contain only a single instructions. So that single instruction I put in the form of conditional statement, that is called as a ternary operator. So when I going to pass the value of that integer a and integer b to this function, so that value should be checked in this conditional. So if the value of a is greater, so it will print maximum number is 10, and if the value of b is greater, so it will print maximum number is 20. So if I change the number, that is instead of 10, if I write 9, so again it will print the maximum number is 10. So in this way the inline function will work. So again I am telling you the definition of inline function. Inline function is nothing but it is the request to a compiler to make our function as a inline function. Okay, and inline function is used to reduce the overhead of function calling. Now, when our compiler treats the function as an inline function, it substitutes the complete code within a single line, and we know that inline function will contain only a single instructions. Now, this is the syntax for inline function. So we know that if any function is a inline, to represent inline function, we are going to use the keyword inline. After the word inline, we are going to write the return type, that is integer or void. Then we are going to write the function name, and within the parenthesis we are going to pass the parameters or argument. Now that complete portion is nothing but the body section of our inline function. So we know that the body section of inline function will contain only single instructions. So this is the simple example of our inline function which returns the maximum value. So is it clear to everyone, or should I repeat? Is it clear to everyone, or should I repeat?
Clear, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now The next topic, that is nothing but the macro. And in last lecture I told you you should read the concept of macros. So what is the meaning of macro? Macro is nothing but the segment of code which is replaced by the name of macro to a value of macro. Now, what is the definition of macro? Macro is nothing but our segment code which is replace the name of macro to a value of macro. So this definition you will be understand from the example. So see here, we know that the macro is defined by the hash defined directives. If we have written in a program hash defined, so that hash defined should be represented as a macro. So see here, we have basically two types of macro. The first one is object macro and second one is function macro. So the definition of object macro is that object macro is widely used to represent the numeric constant. So see here, I think you might have learned in a C language how to define the macro. So this is nothing but the object macro, and that object macro, and see here, uh, macro can be defined by the hash defined keyword, बरोबर आहे? So that hash defined keyword will represent a, or that hash defined keyword will define a macro. After that, for object macro, माझं आणखी एक 10-15 मिनिटं लागतात, 15-20 मिनिटं. हा, चालेल. So see here, the macro are basically divided into two types. The first one is object macro and second one is the function macro. So in a object macro, so that object macro is widely used to represent the numeric constant. So see the example. So hash define. So that hash define will define the macro definition. Now after that I am putting one integer. So that integer is nothing but the macro name, and then I am putting some decimal value here, so that 10, so that 10 is nothing but the macro value. It means that that constant value or macro value will be the value of that object name. So that object name should be the a, and value of a is 10. So that's why whenever we are going to use in our programming code a, जेव्हा केव्हा आपण ज्या वेळेस आपण मॅक्रोचा प्रोग्राम करू आणि त्या मॅक्रोच्या प्रोग्राम मध्ये जर समजा मी ए यूज केलं, सो ऑटोमॅटिकली that a should be replaced with the 10. So that's why the definition will says that the macro is nothing but the segment of code which is replace the name of macro to the value of macro. म्हणजे काय, ज्या वेळेस आपण प्रोग्रामिंग करू, बरोबर आहे, आणि प्रोग्रामिंग करताना जेव्हा केव्हा मी ए पुट करणार, so that a should be replaced with the value 10. So that's why it will say that which is replace the name, means which is replace this name by the value of macro. So जेव्हा केव्हा मी a हा नेम यूज करणार, so that a should be replaced with the 10, that is the value of that macro. So this is nothing but our object macro. And function macro is nothing but the, it is looks like a function call, and it substitute the entire code instead of function name. So see here, example C. So this is hash define. So hash define, that directives is used to define a macro. After that, I am writing here one function, that is max, and in that function I am passing the two values, that is a comma b. Then to check whether the value of a or b is greater, so I am putting here one conditional operator, that is a is greater than b. After that I am putting question mark and a colon b. It will and that condition will work like a if else condition. Okay, so that is nothing but our ternary operator, and that ternary operator will gives whether the value of a is greater or value of b is greater. So in a function macro it will say that it substitute the entire code instead of function name. So जेव्हा केव्हा आपण प्रोग्रामिंग मध्ये हा फंक्शन नेम यूज करू, max a comma b, so that max a comma b should be replaced with this condition. Is it clear? ऑब्जेक्ट मॅक्रो मध्ये काय होते, जो काही ऑब्जेक्ट आहे मीन्स जो काही नेम आहे त्या मॅक्रोचा बरोबर आहे दॅट नेम ऑफ मॅक्रो शुड बी रिप्लेस विथ इट्स व्हॅल्यू मीन्स जेव्हा केव्हा प्रोग्राम मध्ये आपण ए यूज करणार दॅट ए शुड बी रिप्लेस विथ 10 इज इट क्लिअर अँड इन अ फंक्शन मॅक्रो व्हॉट हॅपन्स जो काही फंक्शन आपण कॉल केलाय बरोबर आहे सो दॅट फंक्शन नेम शुड बी रिप्लेस विथ दी condition so that entire so it substitute this entire code instead of function name means जेव्हा केव्हा हा function name use करणार हा function name कशाने change होईल that is the that function name should be replaced with this code so this is nothing about the object macro and function macro so we are going to see the example so see here hash include stdio.h. After that, we have to define the macro. So to define a macro, we are going to use hash define keyword. Is it clear? Now after that, object name that is a, and to that a, I am going to assign a value that is 10. Now integer main so I am again declare two variables that is b and the value of that b is nothing but if I assign the value of b as a 20 and if I assign the value of c as a 30. Now I am going to print the addition of a, b and c. So print %d comma I am going to print the value of a, b and c. So let's check what will give the answer. Now, from this particular point, whenever you are referring pi, the value of pi is taken as 3.20. But in case of constant, we cannot modify the value of constant. It remains the same as it is stored in the program. But in case of macro, we can update the value of macro. That is the difference between printf function. Now we know macro has two types. One, the first macro that acts like a constant. Now this is the macro which acts like a constant. Okay, and second type of macro is that the macro that is acting as a function. Okay, the way function behaves in the same way macro can behave. We will see the program. In this program we have already seen. Let me check what is the error.
तर
Is taken as
तिथं ते प्रिंटच्या ऐवजी सी आउट येणार ना.
मॅक्रोचा प्रोग्राम आहे ना मी सी लँग्वेज मध्ये केलाय वरची हेडर फाईल बघा तुमची काय हॅश इन्क्लूड stdio.h तर मॅक्रोचे जे कन्सेप्ट आहे आपण ते मोस्टली आपण सी लँग्वेज मध्ये यूज करतोय आणि इनलाईन फंक्शनचं जे वर्किंग आहे इट इज सिमिलर टू मॅक्रो सो इट इज वी आर गोइंग टू यूज इन अ C++. ठीक आहे so see here hash define is used so that hash define will define the macro after that we are written here object name so this is nothing but the object type of macro and that we are assign a value 10 to the that object so whenever I am written here a जसं मी तुम्हाला आधी सांगितलं जेव्हा केव्हा प्रोग्रामिंग मध्ये a येईल so that a should be replaced with the 10 so add this 10 plus 20 plus 30 so 20 plus 30 50 50 plus 10 60 so our answer is 60. So if I print the value of a, that is if I write here printf. Some of the students they are saying that voice is breaking. %d comma a. So see here what happens. Gorakhnath and Dipali, check your internet connection. It will print the 10. I am putting here slash n so it will. So see here it will print the 10 also so automatically just like I told you whenever I return 10 a so that a should be replaced with the value that is 10 so that's why our definition will say that in a macro the name of macro should be replaced with its value so see here a is nothing but the name of macro and that name of macro should be replaced with the value. Now, this is nothing but our object macro. Now we are going to see the function macro. So now max a comma b. Okay. Now I am going to use one condition, that is a greater than
So see this statement, see this program. We have four preprocessor statements.
so I am going to use this function, that is max, and in that max function I am going to pass the parameters, that is 20 and 30. So let's see what will happen.
That is defined in get macro. So this is the macro.
So it will return the maximum value.
This is the macro that acts
Okay.
like a function.
So if I write here maximum value is,
Now we know that this macro that acts like a function, we know that to function we have to pass some parameters.
so maximum value is percent day. So it will return the maximum value, that is 30. So we know that out of 20 and 30, 30 is nothing but our maximum value. So this is nothing but the function type of macro, because max a comma b, because max is a function and we are passing a and b as a parameter. Now after that we are going to use the code to check which number is greater. So that code should be present in a ternary operator form. After that we are going to print the maximum value, and we are call that function max a comma b, and in that max function I am passing the value of a as a 20 and b as a 30. So when I pass the value, that is or when I call this function max, so that max function should be replaced with its code. So that code will return our, so that code will return to us as a maximum value. So see the output, it will return the maximum value as a 30. So this is nothing but the फंक्शन मॅक्रो. ठीक आहे. ऑब्जेक्ट मॅक्रो मध्ये काय होते, एक ऑब्जेक्ट असतो आणि एक व्हॅल्यू गिवन असते. दॅट व्हॅल्यू विल असाइन टू द that that object, and whenever we are written that object name in our program, that object name should be written with that object name should be replaced with its value. Now in a function macro, what happens, we are going to define a one function, and for that function we are going to write some code, or that code should be called as an instruction. Okay. So whenever we are going to call that function in our programming, so that function should be replaced with its code. So that is nothing but our function type of macro. So now our next point, that is the what is the difference between macro and inline function. So see here, inline function is defined by the inline keyword, and whereas the macro are defined by the hash defined keyword. Now through inline function the class data member can be accessed. So when we are going to see the concept of class and object, at that time you will clear this point. Through inline function our class data member can be accessed, whereas in a macro no class should be present. So that's why macro can't access our class data members. In the case of inline function, the program can be easily debugged. So why program can be easily debugged, because inline function will contain only a single instructions, and if only single instruction is present, so we can easily debug. Whereas in case of macro the program can't be easily debug, कारण मॅक्रो मध्ये काय असते, एक फंक्शन असते. सो दॅट फंक्शनची बॉडी किती किती लाईन्स राहतील त्याच्यामध्ये आपण सांगू शकत नाही. सो दॅट्स वी कॅन से दॅट in a macro the program can't be easily debugged. In case of inline function the arguments are evaluated only once, and whereas in case of macro the arguments are evaluated every time wherever the macro is used in a program. Means macro मध्ये काय की जेव्हा केव्हा आपण एखादा फंक्शन किंवा ऑब्जेक्ट त्या प्रोग्राम मध्ये पुटअप करू, तेवढ्या वेळेस ती व्हॅल्यू काय होणार, त्याची प्रिंट होणार. In C++, inline may be defined either inside the class or outside the class. जेव्हा जेव्हा आपण क्लास आणि ऑब्जेक्टचं कन्सेप्ट बघू त्यावेळेस मी तुम्हाला सांगेल की हाऊ इनलाइन फंक्शन शुड बी डिफाइंड इनसाइड द क्लास अँड आउटसाइड द क्लास. but the macros is going to define at the beginning of the program. So at the beginning we have seen the example. At the beginning we are going to define the macro, that is hash define. So that hash define is used to define the macros. Okay, now in C++, inside the class, the short length function are automatically made the inline function while the macro is specifically defined. हे जे तुमचे पॉइंट्स आहेत, हे सगळे तुमचे पॉइंट्स 5व्या युनिट मध्ये कव्हर होणार. जेव्हा केव्हा तुमचा क्लास आणि ऑब्जेक्टचे कन्सेप्ट होईल त्याच्यामध्ये मी तुम्हाला सांगेल. फक्त हे मला आठवण करून द्याल त्यावेळेस की सर ते 2-3 पॉइंट तुम्ही सांगणार होते म्हणून. Now, 7th point, inline function is terminated by the curly brace at the end. So, see the example. Inline function can be terminated by the curly braces at the end. So, this is the curly brace at the end where the macro can be terminated by, where the macro is not terminated by any symbol. It is terminated by a new line. So, see this example. The macro is not going to terminated by any symbol, means we are not going to put here nor semicolon nor any open or curly braces, so it should not be terminated by any special symbol. So this is the basic difference between macro and inline function. Now our next topic, that is overloading of function. Now again it is very simple concept. What is the meaning of overloading? The meaning of overloading is if a same function is used, means a function is used number of times in a program by the same name, but their parameters are different. So see the definition of function overloading. Function overloading is a features of C++ where two or more functions can have the same name but their parameters are different. म्हणजे काय, आपण एखादा प्रोग्राम आपण लिहितो बरोबर आहे. तो प्रोग्राम लिहित असताना आपण काय फंक्शन कॉल केलेत. ओके, नाव फंक्शन कॉल केल्यानंतर काय होईल, त्या फंक्शनचं नाव आपण सेम जरी ठेवलं, if the name of the function will be the same but their parameter should be the different. So the overloading of function means two or more functions should have the same name but they have the different parameters. That is called as a function overloading. Function overloading ची definition, simple definition लक्षात ठेवा. Within a code, two or more function can have, within a code,
So this particular statement will be replaced by a greater than b. So already relational operator is used here. So no need to write any relational operator here. Okay. So greater number is.
So what is the meaning of function overloading? Within a code, two or more function can have a same name, but their parameters are different one. So see the example of function overloading. So in that example, see here void print, that print function, and their parameter is integer I. Here again I define print function where the parameter is double f. Again I defined here print function, their parameter is character. So see here in that program, within a code, or simply we can say that within a code two or more function can have the same name. So see here this is one function, this is another function, this is another function. So that function have the same name but the parameter that I pass to that particular function, that parameters are different one, and this concept should be called as a function overloading. Overloading of function, or simply called as a function overloading. ठीक है? See this example. This is one function, this is another function, this is another function. Third, this is another function. All three functions have the same name, that is void print, void print, void print. Okay, but their parameters are different one. Parameters काय असतात, जे आपण पॅरांथेसिस मध्ये जे व्हॅल्यू आपण पास करतोय, दॅट व्हॅल्यूज आर नथिंग बट द पॅरांथेसिस or arguments. Now in a integer main, in a main function we are going to print the value of that function, integer I. So for integer variable I put the value of I as a 10. Now double f, so that double is nothing but the floating type argument. So what is the value of double? Now it should be present in a floating format, that is 10.10. Now this is character constant C. So for that character type value I am going to write the string that is nothing but the 10. So when I run this program, so when I run this program,
I'm going to take the attendance. At that time, those were present, those will be considered as present for the lecture. Okay. Now this is the program on predefined macros. So we have some predefined macros which are already defined.
so when I run this program, so see here output, here the integer is here, here is a integer and whose value is 10, here is a float whose value is 10.8, and here is a character whose value is 10. ठीक है. So this is the example of our function overloading. In function overloading what happens, within a code two or more functions should have the same name but their parameters are different one, so that is called as a overloading of function. So in a today's lecture we have covered three concepts, that is the inline function, after that macro, then what is object macro and what is function macro. I have seen the example also, and then we have seen the difference between macro and inline function, and after that we are going to, after that we covered the concept of overloading of function. Now for that overloading of function we are going to see one example which having the same name, means the functions or two or more function having the same name but their parameters are different one. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
आजच्या लेक्चर मध्ये कोणाला काही प्रॉब्लेम? Is anybody has a doubt?
No, sir.
Okay, so for attendance you should write your you should write your roll number in a chat box.
operator you can use to concat the two integer numbers. Now you
हे जे चॅट बॉक्स आहे या ठिकाणी तुमचा रोल नंबर पुट करा.
okay how to concat two strings. So to concat the strings we have different functions further that concept we are going to study in unit number third. Probably I think unit number third is all about this.
So in the next lecture
So at that time you will see
we are going to cover the remaining concepts, and in the next lecture most probably our unit number 3 will be finished.
I am getting many messages that just a minute I will read the messages.